Sorry. Thanks. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Fintech OI. I am Sumit Gilitwala, Manager and Lead Fintech Initiatives at Startup Reseau. Before we begin, a big thank you to all the frontline workers, doctors, volunteers, and everyone working endlessly across the country during this pandemic. Our heart goes out to all the friends and family who have lost their near and dear ones in these tough times. We are in this together, and only way out of this is by getting everyone vaccinated. So register yourself and get vaccinated at the earliest. With that being said, I would like to take this opportunity and kickstart with today's program. Built on the founding pillars of Startup First, Startup Reseau is a network of startups, enterprise, capital, markets, and services, bringing in a structured interface for enabling unique linkages. As a company, our work revolves around technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Over the years, fintech has been a major part of our work. With our founders built several fintech accelerator programs and Fintegrate, which many of you must have attended in the past. Well, we live in this world where cat images are sold for $600,000 and Redditors give hedge fund a run for their money. But not everything is just storms. Once we ignore the noise and focus on the right direction, we get towards some interesting inferences. Today, India is one of the largest fintech market with the highest fintech adoption rate of 87% across the globe. India attracted $2.7 billion in fintech investments in 2020 alone, with a total of 12 new unicorns added in the past 4 months in 2021 in India. Three of them were fintechs. India has the world's second biggest fintech hub with over 2,500 startups operating, which is up from 737 in 2014. This alone gives the potential of the segment. With building India's largest fintech-focused conference, Fintegrate, we learned that to foster innovation, it is important for the industry to come together under one roof. With that vision, we are building Fintech OI as an open innovation community platform. We aim to create a Reseau of startups, banks, incumbents, investors, consultants, researchers, and ecosystem enablers. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to the first speaker for the evening, Mr. Naveen Surya. Naveen is a chairman at Fintech Convergence Council. Naveen has been known for the revolutionizing electronic payment solutions in India. Backed with 17 plus years of experience in the finance industry, he introduced India's first ever multi-purpose cash cards. He has worn multiple hats across the industry and has been a fintech leader, investor, mentor, and a founder contributing to the growth of payments and financial service industry in India. I will hand over the mic to our CEO, Mr. Ajay Ramasubramaniam, who will moderate the session on digital transformation, a journey through collaboration and open innovation. Over to you, Ajay.
Great. Thanks, Sumit, for kicking off proceedings and also passing on a word of caution, precaution, whatever you call it, around the situation that we are all surrounded by. Thank you for the safety message, and always a pleasure to have this conversation with Naveen, who definitely does not require too much of introduction in the fintech space. But coming to the topic itself of digital transformation, journey through collaboration and open innovation, it was originally supposed to be a keynote. And thanks to Naveen for making this more of an interactive conversation. But Naveen, before we dive into some of the questions and having a conversation around the topic, I'd like you to kind of make some remarks and then dive into it. So over to you.
Thank you, Ajay. First of all, many congratulations to you, Sweta, and your team. I think I've always seen pioneering work that you've done in fintech. I was always focused on payments, but I think fintech, I followed your lead and then expanded my scope of industry work to fintech. Amazing work that you've done for ecosystem. It has been always my pleasure to support you in whatever you do. So congratulations to you, Sweta, and the entire OI team. Very interesting initiative. Uh, well, I would say that it's an interesting time for a topic, and it's an interesting time to reflect, since we also have quite a bit of a time sitting at home. uh, every few years now, I think not decades now, as things are moving, we have to think about how the way that we conduct and the way we work, whether in our personal lives, whether in our business lives, whether in our thought processes. And open innovation is one of those topics whose time has come. I mean, there are biggest transformation that has happened. It has happened whether it's start of internet, whether it's start of crypto, whether it's start of blockchain. Without community work of experts to clients to all the stakeholders coming together, it wouldn't have been there where it is. Obviously, as most of us as an organization, as an entrepreneurs, as a kind of business leads, managers in our own roles, we always give confidentiality and some sort of hiding everything that we do a very high, let's say very high or a prime importance over a period of time. It gets into a habit, but it also creates silos. Gone are the time when you actually work in the silos. I think it's about time that the world really start conversing, work as one on most critical and important problems. And financial services penetration or underserved community is one of those problems. We really have to solve it genuinely, not just for India, but across the globe. We actually need to use every resource, whether intellectual, whether companies, or all kind of stakeholders come together, put their brain together to it, and then achieve that solution. I think it's a win-win. That's where I would stop. And as I said, I promise me to make it an interactive one, not a one-way process.
Thank you so much for setting the tone on the topic and the conversation. So I'm picking on three words from what you just spoke and the topic that we discussed. One is the digital transformation aspect. The second one is that of collaboration, and the third one, whose time has come, open innovation. So let me come with the first one, and rather than just limiting the conversation to digital transformation, let us talk about a more holistic kind of a business transformation. And while it is an in fashion kind of topic, not just for today but for decades, I don't think that we can be in a better time than now to talk about it, where I think for a lot of us to kind of continuing to stay relevant to whoever our stakeholder is pretty important. And fintech has been and is at the core of India's digital economy. And while in the last 15 months, the world has been grappling with the pandemic and other situations that have kind of erupted around it, in your words, how has fintech's own business model kind of undergone its transformation? And I'm talking from a standpoint of technology, business models, and also the overarching policies.
Sure. So before I come to, let's say, fintech transformation, whether digital or business, let me first focus on word business transformation. And actually, when first time you sent me this topic, I wasn't sure whether you're aware that I started my career as a management consultant. Way back in 96, 97, part of one of the largest IT's management division, where it was also the year they were setting up a business transformation group, first time. And I think those were the time, these were the early terms. And to be honest, the word transformation in a business context, I had also heard for the first time that time. And a lot of time we probably misuse that word, Ajay. The transformation, as we know in a simple terms, we use it very, let's say, a generic term or a layman term, but the reality is that it's very, very different. As we all know, the transformation is something like when a moth turns to a butterfly or when a seed turns into a plant, which means it does not leave a trace of your originality. It becomes completely different. And yes, eventually you get those same origins back, either as a seed coming back onto the plant, etc., and butterfly again giving birth to another moth. So that whole process continues. But the real transformations have not happened, whether I don't know whether I should call it fortunately or unfortunately, across the corporate world. There are very, very few examples that one can give. The one couple of them that I remember from my early days were one of us, we were always talking about something like IBM, from a hardware company to completely a services company. So that was always called as a complete transformation, that a company that was and then what it has become. Similarly, the another example we used to give early days was about GE, which was again a large manufacturing hub, a very different kind of animal from there, completely one of the largest financial services company, right? So there are a few more examples in other industries, but in financial services industry, we have not seen these transformational examples as much. You've seen it in industries which have hard coded or a hardcore R&D kind of situations where the technology is completely transformed. Uh, Part of the reason also, Ajay, could be that most of these industries are not kind of allowed to reach a brink. The examples we used to get early days for a business transformation need is You have to imagine a situation that you are in the middle of a sea on a wooden platform, which is burning. And before it burns, you have to find a way out. You have to survive. So transformation happen when you have a life and death situation. It does not happen otherwise. For a moth, it has to be alive. Either it has to convert itself into a butterfly or it has to die. So if you see financial services, majority cases, because they are regulated and fairly managed, they're not usually get into a brink of that urgency where they need to change completely. So what I call is that what you see in most cases is a business evolution, less of a transformation. And I think human beings are well aware of evolution. We are all product of evolution, but usually it's slower than transformation. And it is in a way, okay, it's a continuous progress. I would call more of a evolution for fintech rather than transformation, just to use that term slightly more appropriately. While we all like to believe that we have transformed, the reality is that I haven't seen that kind of a transformation in fintech. Happy to be corrected as we kind of go across the session or in future. So if we talk about fintech business evolution, whether through pandemic and over a period of time, how it has changed. Uh, if we look at in terms of technology, I think a lot has changed, completely changed, whether it is for the fintech themselves or whether it's for other traditional players. And if you see those changes, the drastic ones are already visible on the customer acquiring processes, customer servicing processes. I think a video KYC 2 year when which was in infancy, somehow it came in time, and I'll talk about it more with different examples. Is today a reality? Today, whether you're a PSU, whether you're an insurance player, whether you're a mutual fund, for a customer to register with a video or digitally is a normal, is a norm. While you had only Aadhaar before that, but this has become, even for an entity which doesn't have access to Aadhaar, it's become like a mainstream. And it's not just this. I think chatbots, AI engines, I think the technologies which were getting explored to be kind of done in a future have accelerated. The usage of those tools and kind of identifying whether, as I said, by traditional players or by the fintechs themselves to evolve faster and add to all those technology solutions which can remove the physical part or a paper part in the processes has got super accelerated. So we've already seen that the numbers are great, the experience is good. Thankfully, because of that, a lot of entities could grow, could continue that business. Now, I think you also wanted to discuss about transformation or as I call evolution in business model. Now, I would say that is not as much a result of pandemic. That's a continuous evolution that most entities have to do. In fact, most fintechs don't have on a day one in most cases when the entrepreneur started a startup a clear business model, so it automatically evolves for them. Even in cases where it was, I think, especially in a payment side, our government and the policies have kept them on toes to keep moving to find some newer ways. So we all know what happened with the zero MDR. So suddenly overnight, a lot of companies had no business model from a traditional, let's say, business sense. But suddenly, obviously, they have kind of geared up and identified areas. So companies who were depending on just the money, P2P money transfers, also talking about, let's say, ATM cash out or let's say cash out through POS or cash out through UPI kind of a tool and still earning on through it. So evolution of that continues, and the business models have been continuously evolving, not just from transactions, but from services, but from features, but from data. I think, and it will continue to grow. And I guess that piece in a fintech is going to be interesting and a continuous journey as we're still at an early stage. I think you also were talking about evolution in terms of policies. Now, interestingly, I would say most during the pandemic time, the policies have been more or less stable, which is thankfully. In fact, there were a lot more relaxations by the regulators to allow, let's say, having more time to adjust to the newer policies rather than having a newer one, which actually in a way a good sign, because in that time for you to implement some of the newer changes other than what you've already done on a customer front side would have been difficult. Uh, at the same time, I would say that there has been a lot of generic term over last 3 years. The policy changes that have come otherwise have been remarkable. I think the if you see the there, if you look at the very macro level, we have been advocating a particular thesis that how do you create a let's say a risk and a reward based value chain kind of a model for entities who get licensed. So today, over a period of time, you see a very interesting regime for license or authorization where you can enter in, let's say in a payment, I'm using it as an example, you could enter it as a PPI or a PA. From there, you could move it to be, let's say, a BBPOU kind of a setup, which is even bigger license or authorization. From there, you could move into payments bank. from payment banks into small finance bank and then to a complete universal bank. If you just step back and go 3 or 4 years back, this kind of a thought process wasn't visible. While these rails were being laid down, but today there is a very clear evolved, let's say, growth for business. It is growth and evolution in all terms, in terms of your business growth, in terms of your capability growth, in terms of your value creation growth. So this kind of a model that has come in from a policy government thought process is quite remarkable. And this has happened step by step, so people have not realized. That's why I wanted to bring it that example. And there's an increasing thought that how do you reward people who continue to do well, manage the risk well to go up? Those who are not doing well probably will get stuck or will be probably even downgraded to a lower license or a lower authorization. So that's the thought process which is coming in at the macro level. Obviously, there are many other interesting aspects finally getting attention, like CBDC, uh, central bank issued digital currencies. There are thought process. I mean, some of it is already got implemented, like video KYC. There is a SR. So many things happening across the fintech, which are all positive on the whole. So I think the evolution continues, and it's rapidly moving into a better space. That's where I will stop with the first one.
Great. No, thank you so much. I also totally agree and believe that fintech is not a revolution, but it's kind of an evolution, which is kind of happened over a period of decades, and I completely kind of align with you on that. And that brings to the second question. And I've just picked up a quote which I recently read in a Forbes article on fintech, which states that collaboration is the new competition. And while the the quote by itself might seem to be negative, it's not about that, but it's about how having a collaborative approach lends itself well to whether it's established banks or financial service companies from a relevance perspective, where the fintech and the fintech related innovation kind of provides impetus to the incumbents. And on the other hand, the fintechs who are innovative, they're agile, they get to enjoy the decades of trust, customer loyalty, and security that users have. So if you were to bring it to the Indian context, and if you were to look at larger initiatives like whether it is Sahemati or OSIN or the new umbrella entity, all of which are pretty much very relevant and are all kind of probably centered around how it can be a more collaborative ecosystem. As a key stakeholder of NUE and some of the other things that you've been seeing and championing at PCI and FCC. Can you throw some light on this phrase? Collaboration is the new competition.
So I think the collaboration has come into the center light after 2 decades in India, or rather, let's say for last 5+ years, so decade and a half. I see more as a function of, again, evolution of the industry itself. If you look at the overall fintech industry, I divide it now in three generations. Generation one, which I think I was part, and I already feel like parent in there. Like, let's say, which was like people like us, Policy Bazaar, Bill Desk. Some of us had put in identity to fintech. Before that, there was no concept of a non-bank entity getting recognized as a key player in a financial services play. Yeah, you had some finservs uh, in NBFC space, very large entities, but they were not tech-driven. They were slightly different animal. All of them have done a lot of work. So our job was to not just identify a unique niche services which are kind of not being catered to by the existing system, but also get, let's say, regulator and a government's confidence and to say that, hey, these are the people, they could do the same job and they can be trusted. So we had to lay that foundation. From here, if you see the next generation that came in, they use this foundation and say, hey guys, while you identified and gave us the base, the reality is that with our mindset, we could grow a lot faster, and they became the challenges. So we all know what happened. There was a time when Vijay, the way he drove ATM, it also became for a brief period of time a tug of war between banking and a non-banking players, that we are the challengers, we can do a better job. But then again, if you see within a short span of a time, it shifted with the collaborators coming in. And then we saw suddenly a newer models where, let's say, someone like Samir, a phone pay, starts working with some smarter banks who also realize that how do we get collaboration in place where we get best of the both worlds. Banks bring in what they have, which is the license, trust, confidence, customers. Fintechs bring the agility, brings the new cutting edge technologies. So what I call is a hybrid kind of a model. And this hybrid model actually brings in a best of the both world. So we're at a stage where I call that we are trying to kind of live within that hybrid world where we are working together. And again, collaboration somewhere is still more like two entities coming together. sometimes it's also like a marriage, right? You have to start trusting each other. It's not like an open collaboration where a lot of people are coming together. Now, from here, we need to kind of move in a direction where multiple entities are coming together, which is where, like you said, that there is a model like PCI, FCC, which again we have laid down, where industry have come together for certain cause, certain issues, certain friction. And learning also has been that people usually come together not because there's a larger opportunity. People come together because they have a common pain or they have a common problem to solve. This has been, this is like a conflict management, that you have no conflict when there is a crisis. It's that kind of an issue that sometimes negativity breeds the unity, and sometimes a larger collaboration requires bigger problems. So as the ecosystem gets complex, as the problems become severe, people come together and then they realize that ultimately our objectives and goals are same, and they started working together. So we've seen it in already the spaces of, let's say, policy side. We've seen it in areas of business growing. We've seen in some common areas where there are common pain. From here, we need to kind of mutate and reach a stage where it could be done in a mass scale. Like you said, that NUE is a kind of concept which is building the ecosystem. We've done one experiment with NPCI where a lot of collaboration has happened with banks coming together, even though compete. They've already shown the success because of that, right? And now that is what is encouraging that can government do more NUEs, more such players can come in, parallelly encouraging more and more such model. If you see, on the other hand, India is also developing a model where uh, in our international open centers like gift cities, etc., they're also experimenting that can diverse set of industry players be regulated by one. So we have now IFSCA, which is an integrated regulator, at least across these zones. And they are allowing different industry players to come together under one single licenses. So suddenly the environment again is getting created where from just being a collaboration, which is usually between specific entities or one or two entities, it becomes a lot more involved by multiple entities coming together. And that's an ecosystem which is getting framed. So I would say it's like a competition, which is true, but it is only when it is true. The moment it becomes a lot bigger, when it is like network effect, then it doesn't matter, because ultimately everyone is playing to its strength, not necessarily weakness, and actually drawing, uh, or let's say covering their weaknesses with other strength. So it actually becomes a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, no, completely agree on those points. And I guess, yeah, I mean, like, question number one, or your answer to question number one, kind of led into this, how the evolution is what has kind of led to people to kind of think, rethink, and
Yeah.
unite to solve a problem rather than find differences and
And
compete on
thankfully,
that.
we could create good success stories with the collaborative model, which is
Yeah.
actually encouraging everyone to experiment even bigger.
Yeah, and I think even the incumbents, I mean, for a long time, while there were differences and it was more like fintechs need us more than the other way around, I think that's all a part of the evolution, right?
So
I mean,
phase 1 and 2 created the right seeds for a collaboration, and I think having successful collaboration now, we're
yeah,
ready to get into a bigger level,
yeah.
probably which is leading you into your open innovation.
It lends itself into the core of this fintech OI as a platform, which is open innovation. I mean, while we have been seeing talks and some action for sure around sandboxes, corporate accelerators, corporate venture capital. In your view, what is the core of open innovation? I mean, it is often abused as a terminology. I mean, a lot of things get called as open innovation, and it is nothing more than probably marketing eyeballs. But what is the missing middle, so to say? And because, and I'm not just talking from a standpoint of you as a fintech entrepreneur, but also the bigger roles that you've held at PCI and FCC from an ecosystem standpoint, and the things that you see from another side of the table as well. I mean, even for a forum like Fintech OI or bringing together stakeholders, what are the things that can actually encourage this entire open innovation bit and be meaningful to the stakeholders?
So I could only narrate one real life example, which actually became uh, unplanned success for open innovation. We did it for different reason. If you get back behind the history of FCC, which is just about 2 years back, we did it largely to identify issues related to digitization across financial services and bring those together. And one of the core issue when we started 3 years back was access of Aadhaar access missing because of the Supreme Court judgment. And the whole industry knew that the processes are getting digital, we need a digital solution, and obviously video is becoming more mainstream. So the discussion was that can we create a common experience for a customer around video KYC, or a digital KYC or a DKYC? Can we have multiple such option? And the initiative started as probably more of a problem solving across the industry. And interestingly, a lot of players were already experimenting individually, whether as a bank, whether as a telco, whether as a fintechs. All of them came together, and of course, Dilip Asbe from NPCI was leading that as a chair for the DKYC committee. Done an amazing role there with a lot of people coming together. Each of these players came together, whether they were supplier of solution, created a common standard, whether they were already kind of doing a solution at a pilot stage, in bringing out the right feedback, in kind of helping us go to RBI and request for these guidelines. And to be honest, in a hindsight, that happened kind of a 6 month before pandemic or a year before the pandemic. Imagine if that not being in a place where we would have been. So while today in a crisis, anyway, you need to come together and find a solution. But this became an example where it's an industry which realized that that's a core issue. We need to solve it. Can we all work together? Though we all work even individually to get it done, but somewhere we all are aligned and then kind of contribute to make the right solution and get it approved from policymakers in some ways. So whenever we look at in India financial services, the real issue is penetration. And the real issue is that we're still working in silos. We're not able to leverage each other's strength, and the customers is mostly not involved. The only way to solve a problem, and again, other than banking, everything else, more than 60% kind of customers still needs to be solved for ourselves for. If that's the case, I think this is a perfect case, Ajay, for you to figure out how do you involve right from a customer to companies, multiple companies, dealing with that set of a customer, having products that could be relevant to that customer, and probably innovate. I also believe that there is a genuine reason that why insurance after so many years is 2%. It's not that you don't have enough players, or for an example, credit dissemination is still 12% of GDP. Or let's say mutual fund or investment is still 2%. I don't think that it's a problem of customer readiness. I personally believe that the next 200 to 300 million customers are ready, but the products that we are offering, the way we are offering, the way we are approaching them is completely different. And that cannot get solved unless we genuinely put our might behind and willing to open ourselves. So lastly, I would just say, Ajay, that in this whole openness, the word openness is all about your own culture and about your own ethos. And because each one of us have been taught to keep things, this is confidential paper, this is confidential email, we need to break that cycles and say, hey, these opportunities are so big. We need to think of a larger goal and create a larger system which everybody can benefit with a certain rules to be played. So I think you are in a perfect timing, and this is well deserved. Another solution for the industry. From PCI FCC will provide you all the support required to make it successful and even take your help in certain areas. I want to stop there from the time perspective, but this is all I would say for now. And I think this is what is required for our industry now.
Thank you so much for touching upon some of the things probably that are getting missed out in the bigger scheme of things, but how probably changing the approach and bringing customer into picture, you can continue to stay more relevant. I guess one thing that we have all figured out, or at least figuring out in the last few quarters, is about continuing to stay relevant. So it is not about the strongest who survives, or the fittest to survive, but one who continues to stay relevant is the one who survives. So thank you bringing the customer angle into the play. Shweta and Sumit, should we take a couple of questions from the audience for Naveen if we have the time?
Sure.
Yeah. So if we can take a couple of questions. So if anyone has one, you can do a raise of hand or just bring yourself on the screen and you can have your question. We have time for a couple of questions. So please go ahead. Everyone has already got their questions answered by Naveen today and over the years. So I'm not seeing anyone come up with questions. So if that's the case, then thank you so much, Naveen. Oh, hey, Nikhil has a question. Go for it, Nikhil.
Yeah. Hey, Naveen. Hi. And hi, Ajay. Fantastic conversation, first of all. Much more eye-lightening and very, very true and humble and new thoughts, I would say. I think just a small question regarding the last point, Naveen, you just made, which was very interesting, that When we say that the market is not ready, I think you flipped the complete coin and said, no, the market is ready. Maybe we are offering something completely different. And that market of 200, 300 million people, which is not a small thing.
Nikhil, if you can just introduce yourself as well so that there can be more context to the question.
We can't hear him. I think we lost him.
Oh. Nikhil, if you're still there, you can just introduce yourself. Not Naveen can probably elaborate on whatever question Nikhil just put out. No. Yeah,
I think we've lost him.
Yeah.
Anyone
Anyone
else? You have a time for your next. Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else for a question? Someone. I think Brijesh has put a message on the chat window. Brijesh, FCC is Fintech Convergence Council, so it's a industry stakeholder kind of body, and PCI is Payments Council of India. They both are bodies that Naveen heads as Chairman Emeritus, and it is for the ecosystem. Both of them are under IMAI. Kashinath, you have a question? Go for it. You can just introduce yourself very briefly and then ask a question.
Yeah, hi. This is Kashinath Karadam, Managing Director of Monadago. We are a blockchain solutions company. My question is related to how India is addressing the payment needs of the bottom of the pyramid. Because that is one segment where we completely miss out. One thing is because the prevalence or the penetration of the smartphone is more in the urban areas, more in the tier 1, tier 2 cities. But there are many people who still carry the feature phones. So how do you address the payment needs of those category who are at the bottom of the pyramid?
In fact, very pertinent question, Kasinath. And this one question, every RBI governor in most of their common addresses keep telling industry. And this is what even the government keeps asking. And if you see the initiative of NUE, this umbrella entity licenses, one of the reason to open that up besides decentralization or de-risking is also exactly this, that while we have lot many solution, probably as many numbers or more than many developed countries, but the penetration of digital payment is still about 150 million customers, which means large number of customers are still not able to use it. And exactly like you said, especially people with just the feature phone, and maybe the customers even without phone, right? Let's not forget there are areas where still you don't have telecom connectivity. They are also the customers of money. So this is precisely the point, and this is where some of the policy work is happening. This is where now the industry will have to respond by, let's say, either participating in that, for which partly it has started, also working with the ecosystem and designing solutions which can cater to their need. So your question is absolutely right. Can I give you a time frame that by which it will be done? Absolutely difficult, but we hope to do it in a decade and a half. If we don't do some major intervention, it may take even 3 decades. That's where I can stop. But I can say that your question is perfectly valid, and this is quite a high important in most stakeholders, including government's mind.
Thank you. Nikhil, you can go ahead with your question. This is the last question we'll take, and then I'll hand it over back to Sumit. Over to you, Nikhil.
Really sorry. Yeah. So I think I was just saying that when Naveen flipped the coin and said that the next 100 million and 200 million are ready actually to consume the financial services, but it is, I think, a problem at a product side or a service end, where what can we offer them? I think that needs to be sorted. So Naveen, do you have any like direction, or do you with your research or with your experience, I think that where this is lacking? Like, is it for the next billion people where we are going below the credit card segment and all those, or is it for a very different class? Like, for example, Zerodha may be a good example where they actually penetrated into an existing class but made a very different product, which helped. Yeah.
So Nikhil, I think it was linked to what Kasinath was saying, that the problem of payments of a bottom or a middle pyramid is not just payments. It's a problem for insurance, it's a problem for credit, it's a problem for even investment or a wealth management. And the quantum of, let's say, the value could be different for each of that segment. But other than customers who don't have any money, or let's say those who depend, which are I think now less than 10, 12% in the country, which are, let's say, below the below what we call is the poverty line. Everybody else who has money needs some solution within the financial services. The problem is most of the solutions in terms of ticket size, in terms of delivery processes, are tuned to top 10, top 10, 15% customers who have actually, while highly individualistic, but lot more homogeneous behavior. They all understand English, they all have tech savvy, they all have, let's say, access to technology, they have money. So the choices are high. The issue here is that, let's say if somebody want to invest even $100 in Reliance, can they do it today? Wouldn't a remittance guy, can't he afford 100 rupees a month? I think he can, but can he participate? Do we have a facility? Do we have a model where with the lowest cost we can do it? Can we have somebody paying, let's say, 10 rupees a month and kind of subscribe to insurance, which takes care of his basic need? So those kind of a problem, I think we all know this, but there can't be better time when technology is available to do some of it. We need some policy support. We need some newer model and some fresh thinking, how to do it in a smartest and a least cost or a most feasible and sustainable way. So that's where I would stop broadly. But I think what you're saying is exactly what I meant.
Great. Thank you so much, Naveen, for taking time to address those questions and for the wonderful chat before. So thank you for your time. Over to you, Sumit.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Naveen. That was a great start to the session, and thank you for bringing that conversation. I'm sure in the coming panel and fireside chat, you guys have set the bar much higher, so we will have to do justice to it. So, with that, I would now like to move on to the next session, which is a panel discussion focused on FinTech 2030. So, here we would be talking about how the fintech ecosystem in the next decade is going to look like. Though it's a broad topic, futuristic topic, but I have great panel members here who are going to be doing justice to the topic and giving you information on what's going to happen or how the fintech ecosystem over the next 10 years is going to look like. Before that, we've seen a significant growth in the fintech sector over the past decade, right? And financial technologies has become embedded in our lives. And a number of cutting edge fintech startups that we see have done a wonderful job in terms of changing the financial services landscape in the country and globally, in fact, not just in the country. And with pandemic, we've seen over the past 12 months, the way things have moved rapidly. In fact, changes which we were expecting to happen in fintech space over the past, over the course of next 5 to 7 years, probably they all are happening today. And with that, we would like to now deeply get into the conversation on understanding what's going to happen in next few years. So I'll now introduce our panel members here. So we have with us Vivek Belgavi, he's the partner at PwC. Melissa Frackman, she is the managing partner at EMVC, and Sudhir Pai, who is the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at for Global Financial Services Business at Capgemini. So I'll request each of my panel members to give a very brief introduction of themselves. Maybe Vivek, we can start with you since I see you first on my screen.
Sure. Thanks, Shweta. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. Vivek Belgavi, I've got a couple of roles in PwC. I look after the fintech and broader digital technology that we do in financial services. I also drive alliances and ecosystems for the firm. And been closely working in this space when Ajay and you and team really came together for this. All your previous endeavors have been very unique, and we have seen a genuine way by which you can work with the ecosystem. So happy to be here to support and happy to contribute to my projects.
Thank you, Vivek. Sudhir, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Shweta, Ajay, and team. It's good to see the progress you're making and the commitment to ecosystem over a period of number of years now. So my role in Capgemini, I'm a Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for Financial Services Global Business. What it means is I'm responsible for anything and everything that happens new and next, we define in terms of technology, innovation, and fintech ecosystem. So pleased to be here and join this panel and share my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhir. Melissa, are you here? Melissa, yes, over to you. So Melissa, if you can just help us with a brief introduction of yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. We can all use some great conversation as a break from what everybody's dealing with. My name is Melissa Frackman. I'm general partner of Emphasis Ventures EMVC. We are a fintech-focused early-stage venture fund focused on emerging markets with a very strong India focus and sort of India-centric view of global fintech innovation. We have over 18, nearly 20 portfolio companies of India fintech companies, both consumer and B2B, as well as do occasional growth stage investments. I've been working in the India financial services ecosystem for over 15 years.
Thank you, Melissa. So with that, I'll move on to my first question. And this first question is directed to all the three of my panel members. So we all know digital is here to disrupt and will continue to disrupt the way businesses are done within the broader BFSI space. So what are the trends that you see are shaping the evolution of the fintech industry that you think is going to continue over the course of next 10 years? Maybe Vivek, we can start with you again.
Sure. Probably just to respond to it, the fintech industry, when we call it, over a period of time, it has become a lot more difficult to define what is that industry. And probably a balanced way to look at it is all stakeholders, could be incumbents, could be banks, insurance, asset managers, NBFCs, could be startups, could be adjacent industry digitizers, like so let's say Swiggy, Zomato, Uber. Now, anyone who is, in my view, creating seamless products and services targeted at the underserved should be in that definition called it. And if the delivery model and the unit economics are in a certain way, then they do get valued and looked at up in a different way, right? So I think if we paint that picture and not just focus on startups, then the common trends which everyone is tracking is this is an industry which is driven on data. So digitization of all value chains and ecosystems is critical. If like we were chatting, and in the previous panel we heard Naveen talk about the problem of underserved in rural communities, for example. If you're not able to digitize it, even having a cool app, I will not be able to solve that problem. So digitization is one common theme, if you may, and everyone is trying to find their place get into that space. Now, imperatives might vary by a stakeholder. Now, if I'm an incumbent, I have a challenge that while I'm seeing the new market opening, I still am sitting on legacy cost structures. So how do I play agilely in this new market? How do I change my own culture? Those are the problems I will be dealing with. If I'm a fintech, probably there's a problem of plenty. So if you have someone who solves one problem, before you know, we have around 10, 20 players working on it. And how do we avoid, let's say, someone who raises the maximum cash being the only indicator, and how do we make it a more balanced view so that future organizations get created is the challenge from that perspective. So I'll be brief. I think those will be a couple of my starting points on what everyone is looking at.
Sure. And later in the conversation, we will definitely touch upon these points. So Sudhir, over to you. What are the trends that you see are going to be there in the coming years?
The way I've been looking at this for a number of years, I would think the east side, that is primarily this side of the world, India, Asia, I would think the fintech, so-called the innovation here is primarily attributed to, of course, the financial need, well-being, inclusion, and driven by data, connectivity, smartphones, etc. So that were sort of primary driver for the fintech ecosystem. If you look at Western countries, it was more of value chain disruption. That is, how do I capture a share from bigger players? Maybe it is around lending, maybe it is around in onboarding. So the fintechs focused on disrupting that value chain. So that's how it has evolved. But over a period of time, I think, as we all know, 2020 is an exception. But things going forward, some new perspectives are going to come in the fintech world. I guess we have already spoken about this before, but there's going to be a huge push on redefining the money, how you define money in the future. So, and maybe it is in terms of the actual cash you carry, maybe it is the digital money that you carry. or it may be crypto. So the whole equation around money is going to come. So that's one of the things. And the second, I would think there's going to be a lot of responsibility on financial institutes and thereby with fintechs to do some more inroads towards the sustainability angle. Maybe around the green products, maybe around the areas that are impacting the sustainable living going forward, including the investment and so on, where financial institutions have to play a big role, which means fintech will start to occupy those sort of a market. So maybe these are a couple of dimensions I think the evolution will happen going forward.
Sure. Melissa, coming to you with your experience, what are the trends that you see which are going to be coming in the near future?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with the sentiments and predictions already raised, which are quite comprehensive. I'd say in terms of India, and I was going to say it's peer markets, but there really is no peer, but sort of the next 5 to 10 countries coming up behind India as fintech leaders. I think we're in very early days for this sort of last mile distribution part of the market. In India, that means tier 2 cities all the way through to rural. There was this first evolution of the MFI ecosystem over the past decade. Now there's a handful of sort of buzzy startups building for next billion users. But there's so much more to do, and it's such early days that I think there's going to be a whole kind of renaissance of deep business model innovation and tech innovation for these users. It's just starting, like in rural, and there's so much to do. And I believe that the first wave of microfinance really didn't fully achieve its mission of digitizing that market, and there's a lot more that will be developed. Second, businesses and just sort of small business solutions across the board. I predict that a lot of the kind of SME digitization that's happening now is sort of base level, and there's going to be more niche differentiated point solutions across the value chain for businesses that will get created. And thirdly, I think the sort of cross-border nature of the world, even if you could argue geopolitically, globalization is reducing in some ways these days. But I think in terms of financial services, we're going to see more cross-border activity and more sort of cross-border business models that emerge and collaboration. And that's both because of decentralized finance, but also just kind of the nature of entrepreneurs looking across borders and consumers and small, whether they're individual businesses expecting more in terms of a seamless financial services experience across countries.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that, Melissa. I will definitely come back to you. I have a follow-on question to that. But before that, Vivek, coming back to you, we are now seeing this whole new trend of which is not just in India, but even globally, that embedded finance is going to be the next stage in the evolution of fintech ecosystem. And it is expected to be dominating the industry in the coming years. What are your views on this?
Sorry, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sorry, I just thought I lost you. So on embedded finance, I think that's one of the pillars where the collaboration that we keep on talking about really gets actionized. So to just paint the picture, what we mean by embedded finance is when the user needs it, that person should be able to consume a financial product. And really, if you see it from two lenses, from a manufacturing lens, which is all the banks, insurance, let's say NBFCs, for manufacturing a financial product. So traditionally, they have relied largely on their own distribution channels. But what we are seeing as the broader sector gets digitized is there are many other adjacent industries and players who are creating an informal ecosystem there. So they are creating a connect with their customers. They have the information on the customers. And those are the places where a financial product can get plugged in. We are aware of the situation or of use cases such as Ola Insurance, a ride insurance, or a travel insurance, or look at POS-based financing. And you can go across all the product spectrum. But if I have to put it in a framework, I would say there are 3 C's to it. There has to be a context. It is not as simple as just making a product available. And that's more probably art than science. In figuring out a need which works in that context. Second is connect, because from a manufacturing perspective, what creates a lot more confidence is their partner, the distribution partner truly has a connect, because a lot of financial product relationships are not single serve relationships. They are long-term relationships and have a bearing on profitability of organizations. So how strong is the connect? And the third is how strong is the content. The more we have data which is validated, and that's where probably even ecosystem programs like Open, etc., can have a strong play. I think those three C's become important. Also, it's important to recognize the inhibitors from the incumbent organizations, because a lot of fintech distributors are still relying, and probably for in the near and long term, the existing manufacturers will have a big role to play. But when we talk on the incumbent side with many banks, and especially we go into public sector banks and within traditional banks as well, they have their traditional sales channels. And as a banker, you really trust what you touch. So how do you earn their trust? And how do you ensure that your policies on cyber, on governance, on customer grievances, complaints is aligned? Because once you become a partner, it's a shared fate. I think those are the complexities and inhibitors one has to kind of work towards. But my advice would be, this would be the biggest space where we see business building out. And even if you look at last 1 year, a fair bit of fundraisers which have happened through a lot of fintech setups, this has been one of the theses people have been following through. So whether we are an incumbent or a startup, if you want to focus on this space, my advice would be just follow the digitization trail. And a lot of excitement, and definitely get into the industries and ecosystems which are traditionally called boring. Take utilities. A lot of utility payments are being managed by distribution companies in state-run organizations, and massive change is happening. And there, because instead of giving subsidies to the middle people, now the subsidies will go to the end consumers. So and many of these organizations are sitting on huge bases. Agri is again a big value chain. Education, where we know a fair bit of digitization has happened. While a lot of voice is created on let's say extended education or small courses, but really the big change happening under the hood is all the colleges, institutions are adopting ERPs, they're adopting digital payment modes, they're adopting learning management solutions. So yes, there are challenges because many of those ecosystems still are fragmented. But as they start getting digitized, and as people start figuring out models which are managing the risk perceptions of incumbents with the reach and data of the distribution partners, I think we can see a lot more excitement there.
Sure. So thank you for sharing that, Vivek. So they're coming to you. Given your experience in the broader BFSI space, and this is not just in India, but this is globally across multiple BFSI companies that you work with, I'm sure you get to witness a lot of behavior from the different stakeholders very closely. How do you think the decade is going to impact all those different stakeholders like consumers, lenders, borrowers, regulators, SMEs, banks, and how is the next 10 years going to transform the way they relate to fintech or financial industry?
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. It's really an important one and a broad question to answer. But let me give you a couple of perspectives. So no matter how you look at it, I would think that financial services will have to look out for avenues to, new avenues towards new business models. That means, you have seen in Asia, primarily when through China, the whole super apps started to grow faster and faster, right? So it's not just for consumers, but also it's a new business model where you do not necessarily invest on a whole lot of marketing dollars for yourself, right? So you rely upon others. So someone will be a producer, someone else will be a consumer. So I would think from an incumbent perspective, all around the world, there are a couple of dimensions banks are taking. First one is to see, can they increase the distribution network of their existing product services, and that is either through partnership with big technology companies, and thereby they get access to millions of consumers, or by looking for other sector, cross-sector partnership. So one good example I can give, because it's fresh in my mind, that a number of insurers have approached where insurer and automotives would like to join hands, towards the whole lot of telematics area, because when we started this conversation, interestingly, it started as a telematics, but end of the day, it ended up as a data strategy, right? So end of the day, who owns the data and how the data can be stored and communicated, etc. Again, the reason I'm giving this example is here a consumer has to play a role, insurer has to play a role, automotive company has to play a role, the OEM software vendor has a role. Now, the question is who owns the risk and in what context, who pays premium? Are you paying premium for yours, for the car, or for the software running in the car, about the cyber, etc.? So I would think we are going to see more and more convergence of this so-called the intelligent industry development in other industries and impact of that in financial services. Now, purely on consumer, you asked, I think consumers, we have seen, and we recently had a survey as well. The behavior of consumer is all going towards, we call it as more and more demanding experiences, which they see from everywhere, and they would like to see it even from banking institutes. We have seen the shift in the behavior, the consumption patterns. We call it a digital alter ego, meaning consumers are okay to have a chatbot and a human interactions together, etc., etc. The other point, Shweta, I would like to make is there's going to be a big paradigm shift in regulatory elements as well, right? So, and those are mainly data-driven compliance regimes and even regulatory aspects that are driven by private sector, right? So when Tesla made announcements that they're going to receive Bitcoin payments for the car, or when PayPal made an announcement that they're happy to exchange crypto versus the actual currency, then suddenly, regulators have to worry about what does it mean to them, right? So how will this whole thing changes? And you have seen number of times Facebook making an attempt. This is the second or third attempt to run a stable coin, right? That they want to launch it and so on. So there's going to be immense pressure on that regulatory ecosystem because of consumers, because of big technologies. And between all these things, banks will continue to find their way either by partnering or by competing or by acquiring.
And do you see any? We all know regulation is something that has always restricted fintechs to go out and explore and do in terms of innovation, go out and explore and do. Do you think over the next decade, are we going to see any positive change in terms of regulators coming forward and easing out a little bit role in terms of helping these fintechs go out and serve the nation with the innovation?
Is that for all of us?
I was just extending that to Sudhir.
Okay,
Yeah.
look, Melissa can join. I just wanted to say that you may have to rethink about what does regulation mean, right? In my view, going forward, regulatory and compliance elements are more and more will be geared towards data, okay, and towards consumer protection, data protection, consent, more and more towards that, because there is going to be surge of data. There's going to be it's going to be available, it's going to be shareable and exchange and whatever. No matter how you want to restrict, be it based on country boundaries or be it based on regional, which will be there even for fintechs. It's not never going to be a global universal, but there are going to be some standards which are going to be accepted globally, like we already seen, the standards for tokens like ERC standards. Which means it is pretty much global, like HTTP today we use, anybody can use anywhere. However, there's going to be more restricted data related regulation that would be specifically driven by country specific, regional specific regulators.
Melissa, Vivek, would you like to add comments to this question?
Melissa, please go ahead.
Sure, I'd say only a slight note, Shweta, to your question about regulation is that from my perspective, obviously there's challenges, especially for earlier stage fintechs, actually, and the incumbents. So there's challenges for everybody across the board operating in a highly regulated space like BFSI. That being said, Indian regulators are still, when you stack them sort of up against global regulators in the sector, very focused on their kind of dual role of sort of market development and encouraging innovation. And so obviously it's not perfect. There's lots of small requests we would given the opportunity that would help encourage additional innovation and make it easier for fintechs across sectors. There's been so many things over the past few years that have enabled new startups to come up, and even some of the embedded finance stuff Vivek was talking about is available in India and to kind of consumers of those infrastructure products because of the way the current regulatory regime is as it relates to being open source for payments and ID and eKYC and everything else. So looking forward to more sort of regulatory developments in this space and the regulators being increasingly open to engaging with industry earlier in the policy making process or rulemaking process, but it's quite encouraging how supportive they already are for fintech.
I just would add that in my view, it's a little more complex layout right now than even like a couple of years back. If you reverse back to a couple of years back, really all regulators everywhere were trying to solve for saying, okay, how do we foster the ecosystem? How do we monitor it? How do we kind of get ahead of the trends? And that led to the popularization of sandboxes, which most of the Indian regulators have also launched, and which is a good trend, right? The other trend which was continuing, which I think will have more legs as we move forward, is the whole area of SupTech, which was one of the categories which got created within FinTech, which was supervisory technologies, which are the kind of tech which the regulators would use to increase the efficacy of regulation and probably reduce the cost of compliance, like trying to balance out both areas. Now, while those are operational things which will continue, but I think every regulator today is grappling with a couple of more issues. One which I think is more linked to geopolitics, which is around data localization. But that will have a bearing on how we can seamlessly leverage innovation across geographies. In short term, it can be an impact, but in long term, if we talk about India as a country, and we believe that the future economy is going to be built on data, and data is a new oil, etc., then there could be some advantages of building a whole ecosystem around it. But yeah, data privacy, how to execute it at a population scale, where both financial literacy and broader literacy is still quite varied, is going to be a big challenge for our times, and probably will take half a decade to really solve for it. The second big and hairy issue in front of us is around crypto, which again, there is a fair bit of policy activity happening on India as well. And probably my advice there would be to look at it right from two sense, whichever way, and it is almost becoming a political issue now, whether you are for it or not for it. But if I try to take a balanced path, I would advocate that on one trend, let's track the efforts being done on CBDC, the central bank digital currencies. I would think whatever was being done in last couple of years has been more of pilots. But if I have to do crystal ball gazing, I think the time has come. We are seeing very tangible use cases. Sudhir mentioned earlier different payment methods like cash, account-based payments, and others. Even in an Indian setup, a digital currency which you will be in a mobile phone if it is secure, and we have done pilots where it can work across feature phones as well, can truly give an boost to our UPI framework if we play that right. And the second part of it is non-CBDC related currencies. There, I would say every country will have to take its own call, because everyone is solving different problems. In India now, especially after UPI, P2P is not really a problem for us. But in many other countries who do not have such real-time, agile, population scale systems, which really talk with each other, that's a problem to solve for. So everyone will have to choose their bets. At the same time, the challenge is one thing which unifies all humanity is really the speculative element of not like the whole FOMO piece, or whether you will miss out making money or missing the bus, which is I think causing a bit of a gold rush out there. So that's an area which I would be a little cautious about, where I would feel everyone has to take their use cases of where it makes sense. But CBDC is one which will strongly advocate on that front to really everyone start putting their thoughts together and how we can leverage that lot more.
Yeah, I would agree, Vivek, and I think the whole decentralized finance, they're different maturity at different countries. But if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm looking for fintech for the next few years, that something will kick out. I think this will be around this area, and a little bit broadly as well. As you know, most of the banks now slowly started to even publish the custody solutions. That means what banks are saying is, if the large investments are going to happen in crypto, then I should be the safekeeping organization for that. That means I should be able to store it, retrieve it, etc. So there's huge movements around newer distributed ledger decentralization technologies towards the safekeeping and crypto custody as well. That's again an interesting area for fintechs to look into.
An idea on top of what Sudhir mentioned, a new industry, and today we focus too much on the currency. But it is going to create a lot of new roles. The example that Sudhir gave, where a bank can become a custodian as a role. We are seeing in Europe where pilots have been done. As you move physical assets onto digital assets and load on a blockchain, there's a whole set of organizations emerging who are asset validators, because it is immutable when it comes on. So suddenly we will have folks who need to confirm an asset. So every industry will break a few silos, but we'll also create a few silos. We are working in a closed bubble. So what are those new silos being created are the worthwhile ones to watch out for.
Sure. So, Melissa, coming to you, that brings me to my next question. We've seen in India about 32 unicorns in total, and over the past a few months, we have seen at least 10 of them who have come in the past couple of months, right? And out of this, 8 of the companies are fintech companies. So we've seen about 60% increase in the investments that has been happened in the fintech space compared to last year. What do you think is the funding pipeline look like in the future for fintechs, and how is it evolving?
Yeah, well, in the short term, it's evolving as we've all seen, and Shweta, as you described, where there's just a lot of liquidity in the market and global capital focused on fintech, not just in India, but everywhere. So this boom of fintech, not just unicorn making rounds, but sort of any like ultra large rounds happening, is not an India phenomenon. That's a global fintech phenomenon right now in terms of the capital of it available. Of course, it's further accelerated by how exciting sort of the market in India is when global investors look at the fundamentals of the economy, et cetera. Plus, there being sort of less opportunities in other markets like China or Europe, where they would also be looking for fintech companies. Of course, it's always important to mention in these kind of conversations that funding is just fuel for the companies to actually achieve and execute what they're setting out to do. So these number of unicorns that have been created in the past few months and that will be announced in the next few months are only kind of like bookmarks on the path to building very lasting, extremely large, sustainable fintech businesses in India. We believe that's happening, but not all kind of in the past month. And I think that the largest global capital is cyclical in India and kind of comes and goes, usually in a 2-3 year cycle. So it's not going to be forever that the Tigers and SoftBanks are doing very large, nonstop fintech and insurtech deals. But to entrepreneurs listening, don't let that be a bellwether for kind of the prospects for the companies and what's happening, because I think the trend is moving towards the fact that this is going to keep happening in India. The world has finally seen, and global capital markets have finally seen, how much potential there is. But even in the phases where there aren't these mega rounds kind of readily available to entrepreneurs, there's going to be a renewed emphasis on building sustainable businesses, on getting to revenue earlier in the process, as opposed to building for growth only for the first 5 rounds. And we'll see some kind of new, very scrappy, kind of gritty businesses that don't get these mega funding rounds outlast some of them, and see them really thrive because of the revenue models that they're able to generate and able to crack, not just the scale that India brings, but also kind of healthier margins on their business and take rates to be able to build lasting businesses.
Okay. So just my next question, adding to you as well. So historically, we've seen banks have been very regional, and technology companies have had a global mindset wherein they build for not just for one particular country or region, but they build for the global market. And financial services as a business is highly regulated, right? As we were discussing earlier on the panel, each country has its own regulations, which is different, and it becomes very difficult for a bank or a fintech who's working in one country to offer the same services in other country because of the regulations, right? What do you think is the future of fintechs? Are they going to follow the trajectory of banks or the technology companies of being of having the global mindset? And this question I will direct to all three of you. Maybe we start with Melissa.
Oh, that's great. It's nice to go before both of you so that you haven't given your fully comprehensive. I think that, I mean, the answer is there's enough to go around that everything will be created. There's going to be very niche fintechs that do their thing, serve their one specific customer or use case or solve their problem specifically. And they can be a partner to the banks and to the large platform plays or super apps. And then there are going to be many fintechs that go down a kind of cross product path that may look something like banks in the future, whether or not they call themselves banks. But even more so to me, where things are going is true meaning of embedded finance. By the way, to add to Vivek's earlier response, everything he said was spot on, obviously, about embedded finance, but it's also kind of the hot, buzzy trend in India. So I meet 10 startups a month that are not actually embedded finance that are calling themselves that right now, because it's such a buzzword, like neobanks a year ago or blockchain a year before that. But I think where the future of this is all going is true embedded finance, meaning that literally not just the ones within fintech are going to be fintech and going to have some angle of lending, some angle of sort of data and transaction processing and payments integrated. And that's where everything is sort of going to head, is major kind of consolidation and blurring the lines between sectors to give a more kind of seamless commerce transactional experience.
To add on to probably I just want to comment that it's actually a very interesting one. And again, within the banking space also, we haven't had one formula. We have had specific global banks, but almost all global banks took out global with a local flavor. And there was a specific reason for it. One reason was regulation. The other reason is financial services is still a services industry. So there is a lot of relationship angle involved, there's a lot of context involved. So probably some products, for example, take cross-border payments or payments and cross-border payments. Like those have a lot more probably transplantability across geographies. So if the regulations are harmonized to some degree, let's say they are solved for, you can imagine payment companies almost getting into countries the way social media companies get into countries, right? Or e-commerce organization get into different countries. That can be imagined. But some other products, such as, and especially if you start into corporate spaces, a little more difficult. So I would, if I have to wager, I would say probably it will follow a similarish trend as we saw in banking. Some would aim to become global, but with local touches. And some people will remain local, some people can become regional. I don't think the fundamentals have changed as much. And if you link to the previous problem of gated global data localization, so earlier on we had physical barriers, now we have digital barriers. So because the human motivations don't really change, technology might change. So I would wager that it will not be too dissimilar.
Sure.
So, look, my view on this topic is, it depends on how much tech fin you are versus how much fintech you are. What I mean by that is, if you are starting with a strong technology and data to solve a problem, then your likelihood of expanding that to other geographies or other regions is quite natural, right? So, and we have seen how some of the so-called the neobank fintechs who literally became a bank have started as more on the technology side, right? So as a technology platform, and then slowly start to add more financial products and services, became a bank, then became a licensed bank, etc. And slowly they started to move with that to other geographies, because the core philosophy of what they're trying to solve, be it lending or be it payments, etc., has been already built in. So I would think that sort of a natural progression is going to happen, because most of the fintechs are going to be data and tech led anyways, going forward. So that's what my thinking is at the moment.
Sure, sure. So in the interest of time, let's open it up for questions. Maybe we'll take a few questions from the audience. So audience, if anyone wants to ask a question, either raise your hand or put it in the chat window. Okay, we have one question here from Manoj. And the question is, what do you see on SME lending, especially on onboarding and credit monitoring, vertical or horizontal, or on different distribution channels?
I can take a stab at it, and Melissa, so we can add on. So a couple of trends there, and I'm glad it was brought up, because many times when we have a fintech conversation, so much of it is focused on retail. But SME and corporate is again a big area. If anything, the opportunity is bigger. So there are a few trends that we are seeing there. One is the basic thesis of embedded finance holds. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So I think the way the oldest one would be the way Lending Cart, Neo, and couple of these the initial fintech lenders really got up, and that was because Amazon and Flipkart and other e-commerce organizations had created a good MSME ecosystem around it. And suddenly we had data, and this was a personal anecdote where when I used to go to my neighborhood market, the guy who used to sell utensils there, he told me over the last 3-4 years now, almost 50 to 60% of his sales has really moved online. Shop. It's like having the same conversation, but he's also supplying now to online organization. But you see, from a credit perspective, the same person 3 years back, if he really wanted to apply for credit, a bank would surely have asked for probably collateral, including his shop. But now, since the data is available, the data becomes a good proxy. And because he's on a platform becomes a good security for a lender to want to do it. Right? So that thesis, I think, in different shape and forms continues. There are a lot of operational nuances there. There are things like FLDG, who will take the risk, who will do the collections, who will do the onboarding, processing. So there are a lot of nuances which vary from a case to case. But that one, that pattern is replicating. The other pattern which we have seen, and I'm a lot more bullish about, is where financial institutions are taking technology partnership bets to go deeper into a certain ecosystem. So again, this is public domain, I can share. So if you look at what ICICI did with a partner called Arteria, and they've invested in them. So it's an ICICI affiliate organization now. But Arteria effectively is a tech company which really implements supply chain solutions for secondary sales. Now the partnership there is, as that solution gets implemented in the market, the option is given to the secondary sales participants, who could be warehouse owners, logistics providers, distributors, so on and so forth. But the data exists, the history is there, the connect is there, the platform security is there, and you can now start offering one-click financing. The third piece would be to mention the Trades platform, which is where all the trade invoices are being posted on, and you can plug onto the platform. And then probably GST is a great example, where again we have seen some traction but can grow. Because anything which formalizes this, confirms that the data is authentic and the relationship exists, it really is a boon for embedded finance. So challenges do happen. I think the biggest challenges, and we sometimes miss out in this conversation, when we talk about regulatory and tech, we talk about supervision, we talk about onboarding, KYC, but something which can really support on the collection side. Because that's where a lot of challenges, and if everyone is on digital platforms, then probably that can be a moat. But we are in this hybrid world where some people are more digital, some people are not. So how do you really create security? What happens, like what happened with MFI some time back? What happens if there is a wave of non-repayments? What are the protections against those? I think those are the things which have to be thought more, but probably those are my top couple of thoughts there.
Sure. We have two more questions from Vishwanath. His first question is, will NFT play, and NFT continues to be a hot topic, will NFT play a role in fintech? If so, what scenarios will get impacted? And his follow-on is, will India miss the crypto wave? So either of you.
So let me take a stab and then can be done. So NFT is 100% sure. NFT, there is a big role for fintechs to play. Now, the role can change from what we think today is your role versus over the next few months or few years. Most of the NFTs today are still in the exploratory state. That means you start with the marketplace, you create an opportunity to tokenize the assets and create the standards, the ERC standards, and then you offer ability to list and auction and so on. Now, there are two ways I would look at if I'm a fintech. What are those asset classes that I can probably vouch for and be very famous for? That's one way to look at. Or the second I will look at is which area I will play. Do I need to play in the issuance side, or do I need to play in the exchange or capital market side, or do I need to play in the settlement side? So I'll see what value of the value stream that I would like to play the fintech card with. This is very fascinating because even today there are some of the fintechs we're thinking about, and you're seeing these are all $1 billion plus valued companies now. Is also to look at complete virtual. That means I can virtually create a real estate, buy a house, have an art, sell it to somebody. So the whole economy can be virtual and it can be traded as well. So these are all started as a very unique companies, and now they're going under very high valuation. So I would think this area is building very fast, and it doesn't matter whether it is India or elsewhere. There is definitely a role for an entrepreneur to play here.
Sure.
To further Sudhir's point, I would just add that agree with that completely. And intellectual property is a problem in India in general for innovation and for startups. Enforcement of new ideas, new kind of creative developments, and the ability for NFTs as they develop to help generate kind of ownership data and credit where credit is due, if you will, for creators kind of across different industries who create things, allows for more data to serve them with BFSI. So that means you can start paying the folks that create the things that go viral within pop culture in India, or you can start lending to them or create products around them. And I think it's very early days, but there's a lot to be done around that stuff. And I'd say, will India miss the crypto wave? No, but if things don't move quickly, there's a potential to. There's lots of brilliant Indian minds building in crypto outside of India's borders right now, because that's where they have to be. And so seeing the sort of reverse brain drain of lots of folks coming back to the market and building to solve inherently Indian problems will be a great thing when it happens.
So just to supplement that on the leg, I was intrigued by the second part of the query. So two thoughts there, right? One is we have to look at market applications as relevant to every country. Right? Are we worried that we are missing the speculative wave, or are we worried that we are missing the use cases? Now, and if it is use cases, then let's put our energy behind CBDC and see what we can build on top of it. The second is sometimes a lot of money is built on boring businesses. So to Melissa's point and adding on to it, I would think we have had the position of being the technology providers for the whole world. Let us start providing crypto technology to the whole world. So there is no reason why people out of India can't develop applications. Because I do think honestly that different geographies or locations will build applications as relevant for them. There are some common themes like crypto exchanges, but if you just go away from saying that it is all about trading money and let's say what I want to do with it, So let us find local applications. But a real opportunity, I believe, is let's convert all our IT parks to crypto IT parks and become the development for crypto for the whole world. I think that's a seat we can take, and that doesn't require any regulation.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that, Vivek. And to be honest, there is a very similar discussion on sustainability as well, right? So can India take lead in becoming the technology and data partner for sustainability? Because there's such a huge market out there. So most of the companies today have defined the goals, defined the purpose, defined the business KPIs, poured a lot of money, but that would require significant sort of back-end support, and it will also require significant support from the overall IT landscape, technology landscape perspective, and that market is going to open up quickly, both India as a country as well as from India to elsewhere. So we can lead the way there.
Vishwanath asked a question which is quite pertinent, that we are still talking about services and not products. Completely fair point. It's a overall, to become a product nation is largely a different kind of a journey for sure. Having said the other piece, which sometimes we forget, and really the government is keen to promote it, and we have to find models by which it will work, is now we have an opportunity with having two regulators. We have RBI for doing what we do in India, but we have the IFSCA, International Financial Services Center. So the
I'll just go ahead with the next fireside chat that we had planned. We are not giving this a topic because we went a little bit back and forth. Just going to call it FinTech and COVID-19. If I can have with me on screen, Ganesh, there you go, Ganesh is there on screen, and Ram Gopal from Perfios. There you go. Shweta, are we being joined by Abhishek? Shweta, if you're there. Cool. Okay. Yeah, Shweta, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Is Abhishek joining us?
Sorry, Ajay, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realize. No, Abhishek, unfortunately.
Cool. That's good. Okay. So great. So Ganesh, Ram Gopal, welcome on stage. I think we'll just keep this topic a little bit fluid. Let us call it FinTech and COVID-19, and let us go through some of the points that we briefly probably spoke about. I think we are a little bit constrained on time with Ganesh as well. So if you can very quickly, Ganesh, introduce yourself, Kona Capital, and Ram, if you can talk about Perfios, I think that can be a good starting point. Ganesh, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Ajay. Thanks for being flexible and moving things around. I apologize. I have to drop off in 16 minutes. Very quickly, actually, Ajay and I have done this a few times. Kona Capital is a global fintech fund. We are one of the largest emerging markets fintech VC operating across Asia, Africa, LATAM, and Middle East. The focus is really on fintech solutions for masses. And that falls in two categories: the classical fintech, which is of course payments, credit for consumers, SMEs, insurtech, wealth, financial advisory, etc. And the other broad category for us has been verticalized finance. I mean, it comes in different names, adjacencies, embedded finance. Every year the name changes, but what we do with it remains the same, which is we look at financial innovation and fintech as a foundation for helping solve everyday life solutions across verticals. So whether it's mobility, agri, education, healthcare, retail, supply chain, etc. So it's financial innovation in that context. That's kind of the other stream. About 42 portfolio companies across 14 countries now, and India, Brazil, and Indonesia are the top 3 countries. Back to you, Ajay.
Thank you. Ram Gopal, you want to take a stab at briefly talking about what Perfios does?
Thanks, Ajay. Yeah. So thanks a lot. So Perfios is a 12-year-old company. So we had a very interesting journey, and most people probably know us as a bank statement analysis company. We obviously do a lot more than that. We work with, we work with pretty much most financial institutions, banks, NBFCs, fintechs in India, and now we are also present in another 12 countries in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So a problem that we have largely solved for us: how do you digitize data, right? And then build analytics on top of it. And because Just the part is, as people think about digital transformation, one of the big aspect of the transformation is digitization of information, right? And interestingly, yesterday Shiv was talking about the fact is digitization is a technology problem, whereas a digital transformation is a business problem, right? So what we were able to help a lot of our customers do was do this transformation in the crucibles by bringing the technology. So that's what it is. So that is where it is. And thanks for inviting me for the panel.
So I'll just dive straight in. So Ganesh, I'll come to you with this one. So it's not the strongest of the species that survive, neither the most intelligent ones. It's the ones who are most adaptable to change. And I think there's no better time than now to kind of articulate this. Because most of the adaptable brands will always continue to remain people first. They'll be driven by community. They'll be mission led, and at the same time they will continue to meet what the demands of the society are. So while we keep talking about how we've all kind of moved forward, I think to 2025 or 2030 in terms of consumer behavior and how digital is kind of making this change rapid. I think from a financial industries or financial services perspective, what are some of the most notable changes and adaptations that you have seen, whether within your portfolio or at the industry at large, which can delve upon the adaptability part? So Ganesh, if you can go first.
Sure, Ajay. I think first and foremost, we see a lot more emphasis across portfolio on mental health. Secondly, we've seen a lot more, even though people don't see each other enough anymore, we still seen a lot better camaraderie within the teams, especially obviously given the times. But it's one thing to expect that, and obviously very different to see it in action. Third is again, there are a lot of finer points across the value chain of payments or credit or digital transactions, savings, investments, etc., where behavioral change has traditionally been so hard. And we are seeing things, in the last few months, we have seen things change, which probably folks have been trying to educate the customers or financial or large incumbent financial institutions for years, in some case, maybe even for a decade. And we have seen that some of those behaviors change, in the matter of few weeks, sometimes, or even a couple of months. In general, I would say digitization, adoption of digitization by small businesses has been extremely rapid. I think on the consumer side, we had seen a lot more earlier also, but adoption on the small business side has been quite rapid. I mean, people are suffering and struggling a lot, but they're really figuring out creative ways to go digital. And in some cases, value chains which were entirely offline, we're starting to see a lot better handshake between digital and physical, in the sense that you can completely do your order management, inventory management, invoice management, reconciliation, etc. digital, and only for delivery you figure out a strategy on how you make it happen. And again, there are 3-4 different ways to do that. So we are seeing a lot of things around us change like never before. I think now with the kind of sustained impact of COVID, I think a lot more of this behavior will stick, because once people realize how easy certain things are, there is no reason to sort of go back. I think, but having said that, this is by far toughest of times that a lot of folks have seen. So I think in a few weeks' time, if things are looking a lot better, the promise in the long-term sustainability of number of these initiatives will be, I think, a lot better appreciated, quite honestly.
Ram Gopal, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so now I see what I would say is what we have seen with all of our customers, right? I mean, first of all, obviously, as an organization, we were able to quickly pivot, right? Because we started off small, so we were always on cloud. So it was not a big challenge for us to this thing. But here again, we had interesting problem. So we have one part of our business, as we do this whole thing, processing, we are processing because it's still large percentage is printed documents. Okay. Now, to have a complete solution for our customers, we could not just say that I'll only do either the user consent based or e-statements. So we do so, right? Now, we were able to move this team completely to work remotely. And these are what these are BCom, BA, fourths, who are all, obviously we don't have a lot of control mechanisms in place to ensure that the data is secure, right? And the processing has been done. But we have been able to do that one migration. We did that like within 10 days. We were able to move people to their hometowns, give them thin laptops so they could connect to Spotify. That's one experience which we saw, but which is ours. But with our customers, what I see is in the last 12 months, right? Before that, there was a lot of digital was a tick mark in the box, right? Saying that I'm digital, okay. But now they've realized that this is the way to go for. So which means that the focus, strategy, emphasis, okay, is been there. So just if you get the fact is the same period last year was a complete period of unknown, and all of us were clueless, right? What is going to happen? Okay. I see this current period as uncertainty. Obviously, the stress on the people is all a lot more higher, okay, because we're not seeing this time. I mean, the numbers that we're seeing is a lot more worse than what we have seen in the last 12 months, okay. And but what we have seen from organizations is they've been able to make that change. I mean, it is not complete. I mean, I'm talking about not small organizations, I'm talking about large banks, right? Okay, large banks, NBFCs were anyway doing a lot of this stuff, but the banks have actually adopted this one. So whether you look at PSU banks, now at least there are large 4 PSU banks who have rolled out programs where they're doing this whole transformation. Private banks have done this one. It has been a lot more on the retail sector, but then we are seeing the shift happening in the SME side of it. So which is where they're also trying to see how do I solve for this problem. There are certain aspects of the regulation which I think is still inhibitors, okay. And I think there's one more aspect is how do you manage fraud in a digital world? I think as you go digital, you'll start realizing that people get a lot more smarter and then they start gaming the system. But the part is, I would say it's been a big change in terms of the number of transactions which all banks were doing completely physical to what is shifted to digital. So that's a big shift. And not just in India, we also see this trend in Southeast Asia.
Sure. I'll take that, and from some of the points that Ganesh made on the previous question as well. I think in the next 12 months or so, I guess, as we all strive to get back to some kind of normalcy, and consumer business or consumer facing businesses adjust to the digital adoption that has come by in the last few quarters. Uh, from a financial service or a BFSI perspective, looking at things such as digital payments, which has kind of got accelerated, buy now, pay later, a lot of consumer behavior has kind of altered, not only from a behavior standpoint, but also a consumer expectation standpoint. Now, how has this panned out for your portfolio companies in Kona in emerging markets? I know that if you look at Africa, probably the impact is very different than India compared to Southeast Asia. But purely from a consumer behavior perspective and adoption of digital, how has this kind of overall come across for your portfolio?
Sorry, I was on mute. And there are differences, but also we are seeing fairly wide variety of similarities now. I think after when we've gone through a couple of cycles here, right? When the first wave hit, I think last year between April to June, all the companies hunkered down. I think between July to September, we started seeing most companies come back. By December, Jan, I think almost every company in the portfolio that was doing well, maybe I would say about 85%, surpassed their Jan to March 2020 numbers. And then number of the companies, so Jan to March 2021 was great quarter, and then April hit again, right? But this time around, most of the companies have been better prepared. People had put some alternate plans in place, whether it's credit, whether it's sort of delivery models, like we have a bunch of B2B marketplaces infused with fintech also in portfolio. So I think people are better prepared. They also, even though we are really struggling and going through tough times, I think there is in general greater degree of calmness this time around. And frankly, I mean, if you ask me, our approach also is business will come back. I don't think we need to worry about it. We need to really focus on making sure that people are fine at the end of it, and the spirit and the company spirit prevails. So number of the companies, the motivation is much higher. Frankly, this time around. In terms of behavior itself, the essentials behavior is through the roof, absolutely through the roof right now. And demand, if you look at credit companies, demand is through the roof. Obviously, a lot more stringent filter criteria has been put in place. So from that perspective, people are able to meet targets even as late as mid-April in India, which is by far now the worst hit country. Because your demand is so high that you can be cautious and still be able to fulfill a much smaller portion, but still be able to reach your targets. There are a number of functions we have seen where consumers also become a lot more comfortable moving to digital, which has actually shortened the turnaround. Lot more flexibility and adaptability, Ajay. I think the biggest challenge is there are a number of areas where you cannot run life on digital.
Sure.
And those are really, really at hold. But that is more been a business side challenge. It's not been as much a consumer side challenge, quite frankly. I would even say, I'm surprisingly, even if you take apparel, fashion, some of these things, we are seeing a lot higher digital and online activity than we ever saw before, because number of our companies work with online SMEs, etc., on the credit side or payment side, so on and so forth. So it has been really surprising to see the uptick even in categories which you wouldn't consider essential in these times.
Ram Gopal, you want to add to that?
So I think one of the parts is right. The consumer behavior has changed, and I think the what we see is a reflection in the bank statement. I'll just read about it, right. So, I mean, earlier we used to say that for a consumer, typically there are some 10 to 15 transactions in a month, a salaried individual. Okay, they would pay they would have their utility bills, they would have some premium being paid on insurance or an SIP, rent transfer, okay, sending monies to family members, right? And that's it, right? And then there's a couple of credit which is coming in from either a salary payment, or salary is always there, and then you have interest or something like that from a deposit or something like that, right? Now, the average number of bank transactions for the same salaried customer is increased by 8 folds. So you're seeing around 80 to 100 transactions per month for an individual. The ticket size has come down like crazy. So you are seeing swipes for 80 rupees, 120 rupees, right? So, which clearly indicates that there has been a shift from a cash-based model to a more of a digital model. So that is I would say, the first big indicator of the consumer behavior shift. And so, which also means that a lot of segment of customers were considered to be thin files because they did not have bureau, but they were also thin data files. Their banking did not have much of a transaction. Like it could be a Kirana store, it could be it's as simple as the vegetable vendor, right? I mean, my vegetable vendor for the last 12 months I've been paying him on either a phone pay or a Google Pay or a Paytm, right? So, which is currently representing a lot of data for them. Okay, so you are able to a lot more predict their behavior. What is the repeatability of their business? What is the repeat customers and all this? So I think data across segments has become a lot more richer. I think COVID is done to data which probably demonetization did not do, right? In terms of digital transformations and all this. So I think that's the biggest shift which we see. So that is one part of the whole aspect. That is a benefit, right? Okay. And and again, if I look at the April numbers, given we have 200 plus customers in India and the 70 odd in Southeast Asia, we have not seen too much of a dip in volumes. The volume dips have happened probably wherever it is still a physical model in terms of this one. So the fact that people know that this is something, it's a phase that we're going to go through. There are certain things which will work, certain things you have to kind of pause. At least if I look at last year or even like just the fact, right? Like I was talking about some of the larger banks, even PSU banks, right? Their implementations are going on full haul. Right? They have got used to this whole website, Zoom meeting, they have remote access enabled. So which means businesses have accepted the way earlier it used to be, please come to my office, sit out of my office and work out of my office. So from that perspective, that's from an organization perspective, financial institution, that behavior has changed significantly. Okay. So that is the second component. And I would say that, yes, people have become a lot more tighter about risk, okay, which is where it is. And also, I mean, obviously from NBFCs, there was challenges in terms of funding, which is pre-COVID itself. Okay. So the concentration of digital, especially for the non-small size tiers, right, has shifted to the banks. You see a lot of volumes are going through banks directly, which again, which is part of it, which is where is the part, and banks have, at least this was some, I think they were working on some of the rollouts for the last 18, 20 months. They have accelerated those rollouts. Okay. So they are now seeing more transactions there. So that is what I would see the pluses.
Ganesh, you have time for one last question. You want to drop off?
Sorry, Ajay, I'm going to drop off. My apologies.
Cool. Not a problem. Not a problem. But thank you so much for.
Thank you. Sorry about this.
Yeah, sure. So Ramgopal, I'll just continue with you on the last one. So fintech is not just about the banking and financial services industry. I mean, if you look at it, it's at the core of several industries as an enabler. I mean, yourself as Perfio is a great example. Similarly, I mean, our friends from companies like SignZ or Open, which is enabling SMEs, and there's so much more out there, right? What more can be done from a fintech perspective to enable businesses manage the current pandemic better, whether today or probably 6 to 12 months from now? What are the things that fintechs can enable businesses to do better?
It's interesting, this thing. So if you see that part is, I think there are still a lot of aspects from a digital transformation, right? Okay, in terms of it, which are to be solved for. I mean, like if you look at as simple as there's a company which looks at this whole agriculture sector in terms of data. I think data is still a big area where there is gap. But and I think the second element which you have seen is, like, interestingly, when this whole pandemic kicked in, right, you saw a lot of adoption of chatbot.
Yeah.
Now, and obviously the really good ones which were able to do a very high accurate, and also localization coming into play, right? What we also, I think the third element where all of us is waiting for is the whole data aggregation. I mean, the account aggregator ecosystem starting off, that coming into play, that will help. And there are solutions that can be built on top of it. Okay. But I think there's one more area which is a large area where the fintech enablers, right, especially if you look at so you had pure play players who were originators, like the likes of Bank Bazaar, Paisa Bazaar, and all these things. Then you had the fintechs who came in and became verticals in terms of either with partnerships or they were primarily doing still this one. But what we've also seen is a shift where more and more there is a bridge being established between industries and financial services. I mean, it started with largely with the e-commerce players in terms of the Flipkart and Amazon on the seller financing, but then it kind of expanded into consumer financing. Okay, but then it's also moving towards distribution to an extent. But there are a lot more such industries where there is a need for vertical solutions, right? I mean, whether you look at it in terms of logistics, whether you look at it in terms of even, I mean, like pharmaceuticals and other parts of it, right? So like even from and what we also see that is there's a shift away. I mean, like bank would probably be the person who's got the capital, right? But not all banks are going to have a relationship which is direct to the customers. And some of the banks are also making choices based on that. So which means they're building out infrastructure for, like Open is a classic example, right? Or Neo in terms of the card play, right? But what we see is also enterprises. Like I think Flexi Loan has done this very well with Tata Groups in terms of funding their suppliers. Okay. So if we see this whole open kind of open trade enablement network, I mean, that's a very early stages. But what I think is taking this beyond being the consumer part of it, but more about partnerships, right? Where you are, because one of the big benefits of partnership is, especially let's say whether you look at a Tata Steel kind of thing, or you're working with a vertical aggregator, right? They know a lot about the customer. There is a lot more data which can come in, and you can establish trust, which means that you can reduce the risk which a lender sees. Okay. And to a large extent, I think the direction forward, maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, would be a risk-based pricing, right? But for risk-based pricing to come in, you need a lot of partnerships. So which is where I see that that is going to be the next wave. Like I think in the earlier session, people were talking about NFT, right? Okay. If you can establish the authenticity of the borrower, right, or the applicant or the data, I think that is a big challenge, because what we see is we see increasing. I mean, we also saw some of the sad aspects of it with in December, January, especially in Telangana and Andhra in terms of Chinese borrowers kind of this one and all this kind of, right. So I think trust is important in financial services, and one is building the trust with the consumer by being a bridge is going to be a big aspect.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I don't have any further questions, but we can open it up for the audience if they have maybe a couple of questions. So people who are still in the room, feel free to ask questions. Maybe we have time for a couple of them. So either you can do raise of hand or just bring yourself on screen and you can introduce yourself and ask the question. You have to drop it as a question in the
Hello.
chat. Yeah. Hey, Brijesh, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My question is like we are talking about digitization in this pandemic a lot, and all the government departments, banks, they are moving heavily toward digitization. Now, my question to the panel is like is to for the KYCs and all those the documents what we are converging from physical to digital interface. Now, the question is that how do we address the reliability of those digital informations, and where do we see that the authenticity is matched for the different set of documents in fintech? Because in fintech, it's not only a KYC, there are a whole set of physical documents also which are required. And then do you see a gap there that yes, it needs an authenticity evaluator platform also in between, which can validate those documents from physical to digital ones?
Yeah, Brijesh, that's actually a very good question. And also, that is a current challenge, right? So if you look at it, there are two parts to it. So in terms of identity documents and all, obviously for a bank, you still have the Aadhaar pipe to do the KYC. But the other part of, I think the other new area which is being explored is a lot to do with DigiLocker, right? Because DigiLocker is building out infrastructure to pull data from certified sources, whether it is your PAN card, whether it's your voter ID, driving license, or even the UAN numbers. Okay. So that is one aspect in terms of ID documents being validated. In terms of financial documents, right? So one of the things which is kind of long, I mean, the account aggregator was issued 5 years ago. We have some banks who have onboarded, I mean, basically participating in the ecosystem being ready. But that is something which we are hoping that with the account aggregator coming into play, with some of these documents, validity, right, and veracity will get addressed. So in the absence of it, what today is being done is, so again, this becomes a part, right? What is the most authentic source of getting the data? The most authentic source of getting the data is for the user to give consent and fetch from his online institution. Because whether it is an e-statement or a printed statement, there is always a room for fraud. So that is where it is. So you're able to get data from whether it's a GST data through a API mechanism, or it is the bank statement through the internet banking, or even the income tax document, or even the MCA data coming in, right? So financial documents, a lot of the financial documents are available today from the source directly with the user participation. So that is there. But then, yeah, so beyond that, if you start looking at documents like property documents and others, those are still not being addressed. It is still very early stages. Some states have talked about registrar of these things becoming digitized. Okay, but that's still early days.
Yeah, actually, I'm a startup into this particular gap domain only, for putting a blockchain solution onto the document management. We did some projects with Government of India also, but the adaptability is so less, that these departments or private government, they they actually don't want to move from. They are talking convergence, they are talking physical to digital, but authenticity, putting a right platform in between as a barrier. As you said, even a DigiLocker, there is a big gap in DigiLocker also, because DigiLocker is just an interface. They pull data via API and present it to the evaluator. So if there is, the authenticity layer is not there, it's missing. So what do you
Yeah.
see in future that these departments, these private players or the government players, would the authenticity is a requirement for them, or it is just, it's on the go, whatever is coming is going?
See, I think one of the things is one of the part that we learned in our experience, right? We are a 12-year-old company. I think we were kind of evangelizing what we were trying to do for almost 5 years. Okay. And then what happens in many of these things, right? You look for some success story and then you start, then it becomes a spiraling way. So, so if I look at the part like even 6-7 years between what in terms of government focus versus now, there is a impetus to drive these things, and businesses are finding challenges. Okay, now if there is a specific problem that you're solving, because this is the area that you're in is definitely an area where there is challenge in terms of authenticity of document is still a problem that's completely not solved. So I would say that it is, one is obviously some departments will be progressive even in government, which are going to do this one. Okay. And the moment and like the herd mentality, which is what we are hoping that today in the next few months, a herd immunity will come into play, and things will be a lot more things will be much more better. I see that part is once there are one or two success stories, then it becomes a mass adoption. Okay. So which is where it is. So that's about, so there is no easy quick fix solution for all these things. It is about sometimes doing the hard way and keep evangelizing and pushing people to say these words. And then you have to find, it is about finding customers who believe that these things have to be done. They become your sponsors.
Yeah, true. It's a long way. And as you said, the success story, I'll just quote one. The Startup India, all startup certificates are coming on blockchain from our platform.
That's nice. So, which means that if you're even able to expose an API and some of those things, right, by which people can start consuming it, this could fit into the entire, because most, let's just give you a use case there, right? So today, many financial institutions, especially PSU banks, have a separate program for fintechs. And then they go through the fintech nomination route, right? Now, they do this whole empanelment or onboarding. If you're able to look at this thing saying that this can fit into this part, which means the fintechs, whether are they qualifying under the program and all those things comes into play, right? So that would be a case which can then extend into the fintech financing. That's another space, right? By financial institutions and other things coming to play.
Yeah. Right.
Great. Any other question? We just have time for one more question, and then we move to the last segment. Anyone has a question, you can unmute yourself, come on screen, and ask. So I don't think anyone is asking questions. So thank you so much, Ramgopal, for sharing perspectives of Perfios, and also earlier being on the chat with Ganesh and sharing perspectives from an industry standpoint. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So with that, we'll move to the last segment. Sumit, do you want to come on screen as well?
Yes, Ajay.
Yeah, and Nitesh as well. So if you guys want to lead this, and then I just jump in with the presentation. You want to start?
Sure. So, I mean, like giving a bit of a background in terms of like where exactly this whole thing started. I recollect our conversations a couple of months back where we have been discussing in terms of our experience of building Fintegrate and other fintech properties within this domain, setting up corporate accelerator programs, innovation programs for financial institutions, banks, and that's where we realized the whole power of collaboration and the power of network effects which this industry has it. And I believe that this is the major industry which has lead an example of like collaboration to cooperation in a much more matured way at a global scale and not just at a local scale. And that's where we first went down to the blackboard. We understood in terms of what exactly we can build up ahead here, and that's where we just came up with lots and lots of thought processes and iterations. We came up with this whole platform of Fintech OI out here. And like over to you, Ajay, in terms of like taking us ahead.
Cool. So I'll just do a screen share. So thank you, Sumit, for giving that quick background. I'm sure it was not 2 months; it was a little bit longer than that, where we have been discussing and getting our brains together. Shweta, yourself, Nitesh, myself. So Fintech OI is here, and like Sumit mentioned, the whole objective is how can we try and accelerate the fintech ecosystem in India and beyond. Um, so just to very quickly kind of get into a little bit of background. So as startup Reseau, while we are built on the founding pillars of startups first, and in our parlance, when we're talking of startup, we're talking of companies which are largely B2B enterprise tech, selling to large corporates, and four things or four pillars around which the business is centered, which Sumit also spoke about in the beginning: enterprise, capital, markets, and services that we offer. While we are headquartered in Mumbai and a lot of our work is focused on India, there's a fair amount of action that we are experiencing and we're doing in Southeast Asia and in Africa. So we're looking at ourselves as someone who keeps plugging away and doing this work in emerging markets. And South, the UN designated South is what we're focusing on. So that is who we are. That is what we are. And these are the four pillars, like I spoke about. So we continue to work with large corporates in setting up corporate accelerators and innovation labs and so on and so forth. On the capital front, we definitely are looking at making some good strides in terms of early stage investments, probably in Q3, Q4 this year. Markets, we are already working with a good number of governments and countries: Canada, UK, Australia, there's Denmark, and a bunch of others, where we are kind of bridging markets by creating these soft landing programs, market access programs. Within fintech, we have done a couple of them, which is more inbound about getting fintechs from other parts of the world into India. At the same time, with the ASEAN bloc, we have done a program which is to open up the opportunities in fintech in ASEAN as a region for Indian fintechs. And lastly, services, under which we own a bunch of events and conference and boot camps and accelerator programs which we run our own brand. And that is a broader network that we bring into play. Currently, I mean, we operate on-ground programs in India and Tanzania and in East Africa. But having said that, there's a huge global network that we bring into play, and a lot of our work is through partner relations and partner engagements that we have in a whole bunch of countries. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to work with large corporates across different industries. As you can see, there's a good amount of work that we have done as a team in BFSI as a vertical and setting up fintech accelerators and fintech programs. And most recently, in the last 9 to 12 months, these are some of the work that we have done in fintech. I mean, whether it is collaborating with Mumbai Fintech Hub in creating a India Fintech Market Access Program, whether it's working with Department of Science and Technology and running a fintech accelerator, collaborating with NPCI to enable open up their APIs and get more fintechs to engage with NPCI on their platforms, working with corporates like Royal Bank of Canada and AGS in India running fintech innovation programs, and the fintech startup bridge program that I spoke about, which is more about opening up market access in ASEAN as a region. And like Sumit mentioned earlier and Shweta spoke about, I mean, the whole genesis of Fintech OI was the fact that successfully as a team we had created Fintegrate, ran 3 editions, and 2020 we couldn't do one for a bunch of reasons. But the plan is to get back to doing a mega event of the scale and size of Fintegrate at some point in time, whether in 2021 or 2022. But having said that, now that we are all confined to interacting with each other on virtual screens, we thought that the next best alternative was to go about creating a platform which kind of would replicate or would kind of incorporate several elements of what Fintegrate was built around. But at the same time, when times are good, times are great, we'll get back to doing the offline events. But till then, Fintech OI is basically to bring together different stakeholders and accelerating the fintech ecosystem in India. So our theme continues to remain converge, connect, and collaborate. So collaboration is the key, and that is where we started off today in the conversation with Naveen. And converge and connect, I mean, bringing together people through different interactive kind of forums is what we aspire to do through Fintech OI, enabling those connections and bringing about collaboration in the broader ecosystem. I mean, as a team, I mean, someone like Sumit and Nitesh, both of them early career, but both of them have spent good 3 to 4 years working purely in fintech as a domain. Between Shweta and I, we bring good experience working in the broader startup ecosystem, but also working with a lot of corporates in the BFSI space and churning out different kinds of fintech programs, not only in India, but some of the other countries as well. So we bring that quality experience in not only putting this together, but kind of ramping it up fast. And these are the components of Fintech OI. So whoever is still here, this is definitely a deck that we'll send out to all folks who registered. So we are looking at Fintech OI as a multi-pronged approach to bring people who are vested in the fintech ecosystem together, whether it is by way of having those B2B matchmaking events, whether it is curated showcase or demo days, global inspiration tours, kind of opening up, like I said, not just India, but beyond India, doing those monthly fintech showcase for the Fintech OI community and different knowledge sharing platforms, whether it is masterclasses, talks, curated content. So what we are looking at as a virtual forum is about 35 plus engagement touch points annually. And in that way, we hope to put together strong content and around that bring very good, solid people who are vested in fintech together. And there are different ways in which you can connect with Fintech OI as a stakeholder. While we are definitely looking at individual members to come in, not in a capacity or a designation that you hold either as a founder or as someone who is part of the ecosystem, but also individually who wants to kind of connect and contribute to the overall fintech ecosystem. There are different ways you can do that. Access a large network, get connected to fintech startups, understand what's being thought about as next in fintech, networking events and meetups, B2B matchmaking sessions. So a lot of opportunities for you as an individual to plug into Fintech OI. Definitely, we're looking at enterprises coming in. So if you're representing a large enterprise or a scale up, and if you're looking at fintech as a key or a strategic stakeholder of the work that you're doing, we feel that bringing you into this would make a lot of sense for us and you and for everyone involved. For you as an enterprise, you can get access to curated fintech startup, not just from India, but globally. It will help you build a presence and visibility through talks, networking events, and so on and so forth. Allow you to showcase some of the great work that you're doing, get access to emerging fintechs that you can partner with, and overall building that thought leadership that you anyways would be doing as an enterprise. And lastly, we definitely are looking at early career employees or people who have just graduated and are looking at making a career in fintech. So definitely we believe and we know that getting access to content, getting access to people is something that will definitely add value to you from Fintech OI. So onwards and beyond, so we are already having more than 50 odd emerging fintechs that have signed up. Another 150 odd were shown interest in signing up. We're looking at building this as a community of 250 plus over the next 6 to 12 months. And we're looking at bringing in very strong accredited enterprise partners to come in. While we'll continue to do events which are very India centric, the next thing that we're planning to do is a very ASEAN focused market access program. You'll hear from us soon. And the whole objective is scaling the fintech network from India to global and creating those opportunities for Indian fintechs to continue shining as we are. Sumit, would you want to take this over, introducing our partners?
Surely, thanks. So I would like to bring on board Vaibhav as well. He's already he is online. So Vaibhav, I would like to welcome you and if you can just shed some light in terms of what Rich as a platform is as in parallel with Open.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi Ajay, hi Sumit. Thanks for having us here. Hi everyone. I'll quickly introduce what Open is and what we are intending to do. So I take care of business strategy at Open, and Open is an integrated business banking platform for small businesses. And if I were to explain you, what is it that we really do? If you look at any small business or a startup, the mundane aspects of running the business is something that most small businesses struggle with. The banking doesn't talk to accounting, and accounting doesn't talk to tax systems, and other various systems that you use to run and manage your business. And just giving out examples for once you raise an invoice, the money hits your bank account. You often don't know where this money came in from, which customer, which particular invoice. When you have to make payments to your vendors or for salaries, obviously that data sits in your accounting system, and you have to make the payouts from your bank account. So obviously those two systems don't talk to each other. We have kind of brought them together. So the functions that you perform within a net banking portal, you're able to perform within our integrated platform. So you're able to see your bank statements. You are able to make NEFT, RTGS, IMPS transactions, and you're able to raise invoices and provide that to your customers. Whenever customer pays to you, you know where this money came in from, because for every customer there gets a virtual account which gets created. Similarly, you are able to make single payouts, bulk payouts, queued payouts, all of that. You're able to provide cards to your employees. So you get a debit card, also a credit card, and you can provide virtual cards to each of your employees. As a startup or a small business, and when you do that, all of that ties back to the expense management system, which also ties back to your accounting system. So kind of makes your life easier. And obviously when you make payouts, you have to file your TDS. We make that simpler. You have to do your GST payments, and reconciliations are a problem. So we enable all of that basically, and a few more features which really help a small business, run these essential parts of the business in a much more easier manner. We have 1 million plus small businesses that are using our platform. We have some $24 billion in annualized transaction volume that we process. We're working with 18 banks in various capacities. In fact, for 8 banks, some of the larger ones like ICICI, Axis, 2 other very large banks, also going live. We are powering this integrated business banking platform of ours for them. So we have provided our platform as a white label, and they are providing it to their customers. So over the course of building this integrated platform, we have obviously created a lot of infrastructure that is useful, right from banking APIs to payout APIs, different types of payouts, virtual accounts for reconciliations, being able to issue and manage cards, being able to manage the expenses, file TDS, GST. So all of this infra that we're consuming for our integrated platform, we are now exposing that for other businesses to consume. and we are doing this through a new initiative that we have just started called Switch. And the idea is that, if you look at the ecosystem, if someone wants to integrate with any of the banks, it's not a straightforward process. It takes a lot of time, and the APIs are not available a lot of times. There's infosec audit. There are a lot of compliance audits that happen. So for any small business, it is, even for large businesses, it is not a straightforward take. We have done that hard work, and we can expose it to businesses of all types to consume various financial services, right from integrating bank accounts to all of the other things that I mentioned, and that is what we truly believe. In fact, in fact, I heard on one of the panels, mentioned, and it's a very popular, kind of saying that goes on in the industry, that every company will be a fintech company. That is what we truly believe in. Especially non-fintechs will end up, integrating various parts, of financial services or various aspects of financial services to either, have better retention, engagement, monetization, or process improvement. And fintechs obviously are kind of leading the way. If you look at fintechs across domains, they've automated various parts of the value chain. For example, if you take a lending fintech, the most smarter ones, are able to disburse money in an automated fashion. They're able to collect money, being able to reconcile that properly, and various other aspects, that are involved in running the business. So, would be really interesting, and this is a great initiative by Startup Réseau. There doesn't really exist a community for fintech startups in India, and a very welcome move, because the more opportunities that are there to collaborate with each other, obviously the things that fall through the gaps, oftentimes, each one of us, whenever we are running our startups, there's info that is lacking. There's knowledge gaps that exist. There could be certain things which could happen in a much more swifter manner, and we need not wait for months, or so all of those can be kind of bridged with this initiative. We are hoping to engage with many startups out there, share our experiences, share the infrastructure that we are building. If we are able to provide whatever access that we have within the BFSI space, happy to do that. So very excited to be part of this initiative.
Thank you, Vaibhav, so much. Just moving on to the next slide. We also have with us Sainzi, one more partner. So Sumit, can we invite the rep from Sainzi to come on stage?
Sure. I would like to invite Sheetal Jain, who is a member of Sciencey team. She leads the global head in sales. She leads the India and Southeast Asia sales team.
Over to you, Sheetal.
Hi, Ajay. Hi, and hi, everybody.
Hi,
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sumit. And it's absolutely a pleasure and honor to be here today as a partner. And I must congratulate you and the team on the launch of this event, first of all. To quickly introduce Sciencey first and talk about us, we are into digital onboarding solutions. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Okay. We are into digital onboarding solutions and specialized today in BFSI domain. So we are moving towards the consumer finance and distributor finance as well. When we talk about digital onboarding solutions, it includes a gamut of services. It includes your modular end-to-end platform, along with 150 plus microservices which come along with the platform, which you may be needing for any of your onboarding requirements. And these, when I talk about these 150 microservices, they are they include your lending APIs, they include your KYC APIs, They include any kind of verification APIs, etc., for corporates as well as individuals. And it's a completely modular model where when we say that, you can start from just the UI piece, you can just start from just our rule engine, you can take just the back office as well. Or you could just integrate our APIs into any of your front end or your back office journeys itself. So we automate your back office as well as your front end through all our microservices and our platform itself. Along with that, we also launched Video KYC, a product which came into being just the last year, which is used currently by a large number of banks. We are working in India, we are working with, apart from the top 5 banks, we are working with more than 100 players today, which come from banking, financial services, as well as logistics players, crypto players, gaming industry, who are using our services. We do plan to take up, we are in the process of taking the company global, and we have made major footprints into GCC as well as US markets. We are opening Southeast Asian markets this year. As we talk, there are discussions going on in this space as well. So that is where we are. We are a Kaladi and Stellaris funded company with a global partnership with MasterCard as well. That's on Signsy. And to talk about being here, it's, as I said, it's absolutely a pleasure to be here and an honor. I was just talking to a couple of panels and listening to where we are today. When we were studying finance, banking was all about assets and liability side. It was a very physical world, of course, and slowly payments came into being, fintechs came into being, and so many new spaces came, so many new segments mushroomed itself. Today, it's a very, very different world that we see, where phone itself has become our identity. And all this has, fintechs have come into being, and they have made it possible. Banks have tied up with the fintechs to reach where they could not reach earlier. And fintechs are definitely here to stay. And new spaces that we are talking about, crypto, or we are talking about NFT, or we are talking about any other space, they are definitely here to grow and grow much more, because our problems are not over yet. If we really want to grow these things, out of 8 crore MSMEs, only 1 crore of them are actually banking with some bank. And these problems can be solved only through fintechs, and the technology plays itself. So I would say that, this tremendous growth has come in. And for further growth, these kind of platforms are very, very needed to collaborate further, to partner further, and to look at the new age trends. And Signsy as a partner will look forward to it. We absolutely look forward to the new partnerships and understand, what is happening in this space, networking with others to understand what's going on, and where are the new spaces where we can collaborate with other partners as well. And thank you so much, Ajay, for having this, creating this ecosystem for all the enablers and the players here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheetal, for the kind words. Of course, Signsy is well known, and the kind of work that you guys have been doing over the last several years is fairly commendable. So look forward to staying connected with yourself, with Signsy, and our friends from Open. So it's, we are well over 2 hours into the program. There are only few of us left, but what I would have to say is join us now. We'll be definitely reaching out to people that we feel will add value to the community. So it's not just about making up the numbers, whether it is 200, 250, 500, whatever it is. It's about having quality people in the mix, people either as individuals, people as learners, people as enterprises, who want to kind of come on board and feel that they can add value to the community, and the community can add value to them. So memberships and registrations are open. Log on to fintechoi.com and go into the membership tab and fill in your details. We're live pretty much with all social media platforms, where we'll regularly keep putting out content, stuff which is being discussed, stuff which we are posting, but also other things which will help further the fintech ecosystem or accelerating the fintech ecosystem in the country. So thank you so much. Our SPOC or people leading this, Sumit and Nitesh, under the guidance of Shweta, you obviously know all of them. So keep writing in whatever queries you have, whatever inputs or suggestions that you may have, and we'll be trying our best to kind of incorporate that and build this as a community together with people from the ecosystem. Thank you so much. Sumit, over to you.
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks for the wonderful talk. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a wonderful evening with amazing insights from all our speakers. A big thank you to all the speakers for joining here today. And thank you to all the enterprise partners, Open and Sciencey, for supporting this initiative. Without you, like it's always great to work with you guys. Further, on behalf of the whole team, I would like to uh, thank you all for joining us today by taking time from from the busy personal and professional schedules. With that being said, a successful fintech ecosystem is where all the market participants connect, engage, and share ideas across vibrant communities and networks, and as well as identify and convert opportunities into business. And that's what exactly we are trying to build here. We are trying to build the opportunities for the businesses out here. And as Ajay mentioned, we are live with the whole fintech OI platform. Register now, and that being said, wear your masks, stay safe, get your vaccines, and take care.